One. Man, so here we go. January mock drafts. Good grief. I can't believe we're already at this point in the season.
Yeah.
Just kind of froze you there. You okay? That was it. Were you so shocked?
Oh, I didn't know you wanted me to. I didn't know you wanted me to talk. Sorry.
Kyle's still struggling with cold opens. I guess we should just get right to it. What's going on, Fantasy Football Nation? This is the Dynasty Green Room with your host, Jeff DiMatteo of Gridiron Ratings, and with me, as always, my faithful companion, Kyle Lindemann of Rotoballer. Kyle, how you doing?
Man, I'm good. We got a doubleheader for the next 3 days. Everybody's complaining, but I look at it, hey, we got 2 games today, we got 2 tomorrow, and we got 2 on Monday. What could be better than that?
2 on Monday. So, I mean, this show's going to release on Monday. But it's Saturday right now. We just got the news that the Steelers and Bills are being moved. So 2 games on a Monday. Yeah. Like, before we get into the mock, like, what's your thought on that? Like, at 4:30 on a Monday, like, I have to work Monday. I don't know how other folks feel about this, but man, that's trying to sneak out early to try and catch some of that game is going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually off Monday, so I get it. Yeah, I mean, I just think for the sake of safety, I don't think they're doing it for the sake of the game. I think it's more so like protecting the fans and like the general public. I think there was like dozens of people that died in like the Buffalo snowstorm last year because people were literally stuck and the snow was so deep the rescue crews couldn't even get to them. So I don't think people realize like Buffalo gets the most snow, I think, like in the United States. I mean, it's not uncommon for I'm in Northeast Ohio and we get a good amount, but Buffalo gets way more than us. I mean, they could get 3 feet of snow in a night. I mean, it's crazy.
I lived in Colorado for a long time, and we'd get snow like that, you know, Memorial Day, 4th of July, like when it's summertime, it's like, oh, here's a foot of snow, 2 feet of snow, whatever. And, you know, all we can hope for right now is that the folks in those really cold areas that are getting a ton of snow and ice and things are staying safe. Football is secondary, but obviously we're here to, you know, have a little bit of fun, and we want to have some fun with it. So why don't we get out of the serious stuff and get down to the topic at hand today? January mock draft, man. Yeah. It's that time. So you just did a great article on Rotoballer. You took everyone through the top 32 with trades. You had a couple trades in this one, and we'll outline some of the trades as we get to that point in the draft. But why don't we kick this off right away at the 101, right at the top? You've got a trade. You've got Washington coming from 2-1 to go ahead and take quarterback out of USC, Caleb Williams. Tell us about the trade first, then let's talk about Caleb.
Well, I kind of got a little bit of flack on Twitter this week, but I've been saying all along that I think Washington really wants to make a splash in this draft with the new owners in place. You know, some people were saying that Josh Harris kind of is hands off, but I would argue he's not hands off. Like, why did Washington trade Chase Young and why did they trade Montez Sweat at the deadline if the owner wasn't involved? So people say, you know, he's hands off, but like, if that's true, then why would the current regime in place in Washington trade away picks for the next regime and make it harder for them to keep their jobs? Because obviously Washington's defense went to crap when they traded those guys away. So it's like, you're telling me the owner wasn't involved in that? I just find that a little fishy. So sometimes you can't please the Twitter mobs, but Caleb is from Washington, D.C. I just think he puts them on the map. No guarantee that he's going to be the best quarterback in the class, even though I think the odds say he will be, but there's no guarantee. He really kind of puts the Commanders back in the national spotlight again. So I just think that that's something that they want. You know, they're trying to fill the seats. I know that fans have been showing up more because they're excited Dan Snyder's gone. Now, this is purely hypothetical. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. So, but I had them giving up, I believe it was 2, and they have 2 seconds, you know, so it was like they're giving up a decent amount, but not a ton. And Chicago, really, if Chicago is going to stick with Justin Fields, it would only make sense for them to trade down because there's no point in taking Marvin Harrison with the first pick when you could probably move down a couple picks and still get him and get compensation to fill out the rest of your roster. So I think that's what's going to happen. If Chicago decides, hey, we're moving on from Justin Fields, they'll probably take a quarterback at 1. But if they decide, hey, we're going to do what we did last year, we're going to trade down, we're going to build around Fields, there's no way they're picking first. So that's just why I did that. And I think it's important for people out there to realize there's going to be plenty of draft day trades. Like I make these mocks and all the other experts make these mock drafts, but like there's no way for us to know who's trading with who. And it happens all the time. So
True. So to be
that's
clear, the
kind of where
trade
I'm at.
is the number 1 overall pick. So we've got the number 1 overall pick is being traded for the number 2 overall pick plus 2 seconds.
Yeah, and I think the Mitchell Trubisky trade a couple of years ago was very similar as far as compensation in that regard. I don't see Washington moving up, giving up their future one to move up one spot. I mean, I don't know if that's really ever happened in NFL history. I think the Giants in 2004, when Eli Manning basically said he wouldn't play for the Chargers took Eli Manning 1, the Giants took Phillip Rivers 4, and they swapped them. But the Giants ended up giving the Chargers their first round pick the next year to only move up 3 spots. Right. I believe there was something else involved. I'd have to look, but I don't
thought
think
there
he
was
going to future one.
I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think there was 2 picks involved, and I think one of them turned into Sean Merriman, and another one turned into Nate Kading, the kicker out of Iowa. I could be mistaken there, but I thought it was something like that. Maybe Kading was in another trade, but yeah, there was definitely a couple of picks involved there. But interesting stuff. I think it would be really cool to see Washington come up, take Caleb Williams. He profiles as a franchise quarterback. There are some holes in his game. He's not foolproof. I think guys like Trevor Lawrence were a bit more polished coming out. You can say what you want about him today. The Jacksonville situation hasn't been conducive to Lawrence being successful necessarily. But Caleb Williams has all of the creativity, all of the athleticism, the arm strength. He can do everything you want him to do. I want to see him get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. I'd like to see him take fewer sacks, and I want to see him push fewer bad situations. He kind of gets into a spot where he starts scrambling around and running around where there were guys open in his face, but he's turning down shorter and intermediate routes to go deep to hit that Sports Center highlight. And that's not always conducive to getting wins. USC struggled a little bit this year. And I'm not saying it's on him because that defense was pretty porous, but Caleb himself has some holes in his game that really need to be rectified. I'm hoping a change from what he has with Lincoln Riley to NFL grade coaching will help fix some of those things because they're not insurmountable things. Like he still deserves to be the number 1 pick in the draft. I'll have grades out on him probably in the next couple of weeks, but he grades exceptionally high. Some guys have him compared to Andrew Luck. I'm not sure I'm there. I'm a shade behind Andrew Luck, shade behind what Trevor Lawrence was when he came out, but he's still right in that conversation for sure. Let's go ahead and bounce the number 2 pick. Chicago comes out of the 1 hole, goes back to 2. You've got him taking Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. I think we all know about Marv. Give me your take.
Yeah. Well, I think people would say if Washington did that, then McLaurin would be a part of the compensation. But I just don't see that because if the Bears decide to keep Justin Fields, they've got to pay him in a year, so he becomes expensive. DJ Moore is already expensive, so it's like they've got so many holes in their roster. They're going to have an expensive quarterback and 2 expensive receivers. I just don't see it. I could see them going Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt or Harrison. I mean, it's pretty clear the Bears defense was pretty good the last 2 months of the year.
Right.
I definitely see them going offense with their first pick. And, I believe their left tackle actually was pretty decent this year, but it's just one of those things where just put the best 5 guys on the line and worry about where they're lining up later. So I do like Harrison just because I think he's probably the best receiver we've seen come out since Jamar Chase. And I know that's only a couple years, but he checks all those boxes for me. So if Chicago really wants to build around Justin Fields, I feel like it only makes sense to give him another weapon. Now, whether that's going to happen or not, we have no idea. Again, I don't have any inside source on that. Some people, especially Courtney Cronin, she had a lot of good stuff out this week. So she had a lot of good stuff. I don't know. I would think the fact that they fired their offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, bringing in someone else, maybe that means that change is coming. But I just have a hard time because, you're going to, Eberflus is in year 3. He got better this year, but then it's like you're going to stick what's probably going to be a lame duck coach with a rookie quarterback. And then it's like if Chicago doesn't do really well, then they're completely resetting the staff again. And I don't like that for Caleb, or whatever quarterback they bring in. There's got to be stability. If we look at the best organizations in the NFL, they have synergy. Like the GM, the head coach, and the quarterback are all on the same page. If you don't have that, it's just really hard.
There's definitely a lot being made of what's going on in Chicago and whether they should or shouldn't keep Fields. But I think if you're taking Marvin Harrison here, and if you're moving back and collecting some more draft capital, especially a couple of twos in this case, that's a no-brainer slam dunk move. Fields did flash, enough last year to show that he is an NFL quarterback. He is good enough. I know everybody wants Patrick Mahomes. I know everybody wants the superstar Tom Brady, top of the league guy. Look, there's 3 elite quarterbacks in the league at any given time. Okay, top 10%. It's only 32 starting quarterbacks. It's impossible to chase that dream and chase that unicorn. I'm personally fine with keeping Fields. If you give him Marvin Harrison plus Cole Kmet plus DJ Moore, you have a collection of weapons now plus his ability to run, where if you can complement that with the run game and keep the defense at least maintaining status quo, heck, even finding an edge to go on the other side of Montez Sweat, the Bears could get really dangerous. You don't need an elite quarterback. You need a good enough quarterback. And Fields is definitely good enough. And he puts a lot of defenses off balance because of his ability to run. People cite his passing yards and his touchdowns all the time, but I'm like, well, wait a minute. Now kick in his rushing yards too. Because people did that to Lamar early in his career also. They said, oh, well, he only throws for 180 yards a game. Yeah, but he's running for $120. And it's, when you start putting that together and you're like, well, my quarterback's getting me 300 some odd yards. Does it matter if it's through the air or on the ground? He just needs the 300 yards. And so Fields is the guy that gives you that kind of upside. I don't think we've seen his best football yet. There's some questions about the way he processes and all this, but Marvin Harrison is a generational level prospect. We haven't seen a wide receiver prospect as clean and as tight profile-wise as Harrison probably since Calvin Johnson. And when we start to think about it in those terms, we're like, wow, that's a really good football player. Let's get him out there. I hope he can protect himself better than he did at Ohio State. He took some really big hits at times. Some of that's probably just due to his concentration, getting to the football, regardless of where it's located on the field. And he takes too many shots. I do want to see him look out for himself because I'd hate to see his career shortened by injury because he got teed up a few times too many. But let's go ahead and keep it moving here. Third pick, New England Patriots. Oh, do you have something to add?
No? Well, I was just going to say, if Minnesota doesn't – can you hear me? If Minnesota doesn't bring Kirk Cousins back, I think they're really going to be in the mix to move up, but I don't know if, are the Bears going to want to give someone in their division the number 1 pick? I don't know if I see that because it's just something that could come back and haunt them so forever. Much.
Yeah. You'd need the starting price would start at 3 1s and 3 2s and a player. Like there's no way you're letting your division come in and take a Caleb Williams or a Drake May and letting them run the table on you for the next decade plus. Like there's, that I think that would be insane. That's another podcast in and of itself right there. But let's go ahead and keep chopping through this thing. So number 3, New England Patriots, quarterback Drake May. You've got Gerard Mayo's the new head coach. They're going to bring in a new GM, possibly not until after the draft. Okay, so you have some scouts and decision makers that are already in place. They need a quarterback, right? What's going on with Zappy and with Mac Jones isn't working. They need to go find some receivers, get a quarterback, and picking at 3, you can really hit both in this draft. Drake May, grades out very, very well. He's got prototypical size, mobility, all that stuff. And then you can still tack on a wide receiver in the second. That might be where they're headed here. You obviously agree. You're taking Drake May at 3. Tell me about him.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at them similar to Cincinnati in 2020, where it was like they drafted Burrow and then they paired him right up with T. Higgins right out of the gate. So let's hopefully that, Patriots defense is pretty good. Their offensive line actually is not bad. I think Ramondre Stevenson's a capable running back. Hunter Henry's okay. Quarterback receiver is really their biggest need. And the ironic part is it's probably the best class to get both of those guys. So New England's not used to picking this high. I believe they took Willie McGinnis, I think 30-something years ago, somewhere around here. And then I think 93, they took Bledsoe first overall. So, I mean, this is really the first time in 30 years New England's been picking this high. I think 2001, they got Richard Seymour with like the 7th pick. But like, other than that, they're not accustomed to picking this high. I just think you got to get the quarterback. I think Drake May kind of, someone that could step in, has enough flashes. He's kind of got your prototypical size, arm, speed. He's good at kind of making plays off script. So going to be a lot of debate in terms of who's QB1 in this draft. I think you and I agree it's Caleb, but not every team's going to see it that way. But I really like May. He's young, but I feel like this would be like a slam dunk for the Patriots here. I almost kind of compare it to like the Spurs getting like Wemby, right? It was like they're bad for a couple years and they landed their new future. And I kind of look at like Drake
Yep.
May with the Patriots the same way.
This could be the last time we see them picking this high for a while. If Drake May ends up being the guy we think he is. The only thing I need to see from him is to stop forcing the ball as frequently as he does. He trusts his arm a little too much, whether it be on distance or velocity. Really want to see him take what the defense gives him just a little bit more. But excellent prospect all in all. We've kind of stretched out these first three picks a little bit. So let's go ahead and hit number 4. Yet another trade here. So in this trade, it was Arizona trading out with Atlanta. Atlanta comes up and they also take a quarterback. LSU product, Jaden Daniels, electric athlete. Yeah. Golly, putting him with Bijan and London and Pitts. For the love of Pete, can we please get a creative offensive coordinator on that staff to unlock that group? Tell me about the trade, and then let's go into Jaden a little bit.
Well, so Atlanta's kind of one of those teams. I think they're kind of one piece away. They've got a pretty good roster. Their defense was pretty good this year. I think they could use another pass rusher, but their offensive line is pretty good. I mean, everything's in place for Atlanta, but they don't have a quarterback. And, Terry Fontenot, this is going to be year 4 of GM for him. He survived. Arthur Smith did not. Is he really going to go into the season with uncertainty at quarterback? I think he's been given a second chance. And to his credit, I think he actually has done a nice job drafting this team together. But same time, they haven't won. So I do see them. I do see Minnesota potentially being someone. I do see the Raiders. In this case, Atlanta gives up 843 in their 2025 second to move up 4 spots. They'll get 104 back from Arizona. I think that's a good trade for Arizona because they're not one player away. I think if Marvin Harrison was still on the board, I do think they will draft him. But at this point, it's like you can move back a couple of spots, get some more picks. Atlanta's kind of just one guy away. I feel like G. Daniels that's a perfect spot for him because he's already got all these weapons and a decent line around him.
It'll be impossible to avoid the Michael Vick comps the second he gets drafted. Electric athlete. I think he looks like the closest thing we've seen to Lamar since Lamar. He's fluid, he's fast, he's quick, he's twitched up athlete, and he's got the gun to go with it. I would like to see him show a little bit more judgment on when to use it. There's some throws to the perimeter that I'd like to see him really put some more gas behind. But all in all, I mean, this is another great looking prospect. It's really hard to hate these quarterbacks. A few years ago, we had Lawrence and Wilson and Trey Lance and all these guys coming out, and everyone was kind of all on the quarterback wagon. These guys blow those guys away in terms of just like spec for spec grade. Jaden Daniels looks like he's going to be a fantasy dynamo, and he's going to have an argument, all due respect to Caleb Williams and Drake May, for being the 101 in Superflex Dynasty Superflex Dynasty rookie drafts.
Yeah.
Can't get all my words out today. But yeah, love Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to be a great player. Let's go to number 5. This is one of your favorite players, and it's one of your favorite situations. You've been trying to put this one in Sharpie for about 6 months already. Los Angeles Chargers in the 5th pick take Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. I know you've got the George Kittle comp on this guy. Tell us why.
Well, I think that and I'm not saying he's apples to apples, George Kittle, but I look at George Kittle as the best 2-way tight end in the NFL. Like, he's so good as a receiver. He's a yak monster, but like, he loves to block, and he's an amazing blocker, and he just loves to hit guys. And tight end is like such a physical position. I feel like maybe the dynasty and fantasy community sometimes forget that, to be a tight end, you have to like to hit people and you have to be able to block. And I think sometimes they fall in love with all these athletes and projects at tight end that don't necessarily pan out. Bowers, to me, is someone that I feel like can play right away. He's polished. Yeah. He does everything well. And I don't know what the Chargers are going to do. I think they could go left tackle. They could maybe go Malik Neighbors, depending on what happens either with Bosa or Khalil Mack. Maybe they go edge rusher. Or they honestly could trade back, because I just feel like they obviously have Herbert, but they are going to be really up against the salary cap next year. I mean, they can figure out some ways to restructure some of these deals, but they're going to need some core pieces. So they could go a variety of ways. Obviously, we don't know for sure to the new head coach and GM are going to be, but I just feel like Bowers and Herbert together, man, it was just like he's a total security blanket for Herbert, but he can also like run down the seam, and you can throw deep to him. So I just feel
Absolutely.
like he's
I kind of
probably
look
the
at this
most.
as a. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there. You had a little bit of a delay. My bad.
Oh no, I just feel like he's one of the most pro-ready players in this draft. Like I just feel like there's a steep learning curve for a lot of tight ends. A year or two. I see him doing something similar to what Sam Laporta did this year. I just feel like he's just a plug and play guy from day one.
Whoa. All right. I mean, that's big praise to Laporta, numbers there because he's a record setter
Yeah.
now. Jim Harbaugh is out here interviewing with the Chargers allegedly this upcoming week. If Harbaugh lands there, I think the door's open on Bowers. I think the door's open on Neighbors. They may not want to trade down because he may want to get an elite playmaker, knowing full well that Keenan Allen isn't getting younger. Mike Williams really has trouble staying on the field. I don't want to say injury prone because that's not really a thing, but man, it seems to happen to this guy almost every year. And QJ, Eckler's a little older, a little nicked up. Yeah, he looked human last year for sure. And they don't get him involved in the pass game enough anymore. I think that was a function of the new regime from an offensive play calling standpoint. But they've got to do something different. I think Bowers could be that kind of Travis Kelce type player for Justin Herbert, where you can trust him over the middle and it opens things up, especially as Keenan Allen kind of progresses into the twilight of his career. I love that pick there. I'd love to see him end up there. I actually wanted Pitts there a couple of years ago, and that didn't work out. But let's go to number 6. The New York Football Giants here, finally, for the love of everything that's holy, getting some wide receiver help here. Malik Neighbors. This guy is 99.9% of Marvin Harrison. He is an absolute stud. Tell us about the fit and why we should love Malik Neighbors to the Giants.
Well, I just feel like he's kind of the alpha for their offense that they need. They're kind of in this conundrum with they extended Daniel Jones. Now they can get out of this deal after 2024 without a ton of dead cap. If they move on this offseason, I think it's $69 million dead money. Now, if they do it post June 1st, they could spread it out, but that is crippling. I mean, that would be the highest. I think Matt Ryan's dead cap hit was like 41 or 42 million, which was the highest in NFL history. So this is way more. So I think that, they have 2 tackles who were drafted high. I know that not everyone's been crazy about Evan Neal, but I don't know that Evan Neal's really got the skill set that they could kick him inside. So I think they're kind of, pot committed there, even though I could think they could go offensive line, but obviously you're not going to draft a guard that high. So I just really, really like Neighbors. He's just so explosive. He's a big play waiting to happen. He was a huge part of Jaden Daniels, reason that he won the Heisman. So I just think New York, they do have some holes, but like they just don't. I feel like they've got all these like wide receiver 2s on their team that they're trying to like, catch lightning in a bottle, and it's just hard to do. I feel like he becomes the alpha in the room.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he steps into almost any team right now. I mean, he's probably the number 1 on. I mean, right now, before he's ever stepped on a football field, he's probably the number 1 on at least 8 teams, maybe 10. And that's saying something for a kid who's never taken an NFL snap. So, no, I love Malik Neighbors. Exceptionally high grade on him. He's fast. He's fluid. He's got great hands. Does everything you want. We'll have a scouting report breakdown on him here shortly. But, no, I love Neighbors to the Giants. Let's get on to 7, though. This is kind of a mystery box here because we don't really know what we're getting. The Tennessee Titans are up. We don't know who the head coach is. We're not entirely sure what's going on with the GM and who's really making the decisions there, whether it's going to be the new coach, a GM, or what that's going to look like. But you've got Olu Fashanu here. They're going O-line, getting back in the trenches. They haven't really been great at tackle in a few years. Derrick Henry's probably gone. Right. Talk to us about Fashanu as being the guy that we need to have here to Tennessee at 7.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was probably a better fit when Vrabel was there because it just fits their identity. Okay. I just think this is a guy that's probably a top 3 pick in most drafts, and he's kind of knocked down the board a little bit here because the wide receiver and quarterbacks are so strong, plus Bowers. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a guy, it's hard to project him falling any further than this spot because he's just so good. I don't believe he allowed a single sack in his whole college career. I mean, he just really checks every box. It's like he's powerful, he's athletic, he's got good footwork, he's been durable. He's agile enough that he can stop these kind of, hybrid kind of outside linebacker, smaller, faster edge guys. Like he's got the speed to compete with them, but he's got the strength to kind of compete with like a bull rusher. And, he's a good run blocker. So it's just like, he's just instant plug and play for me. And Tennessee's kind of in a spot, right? They're kind of in a spot like the Giants where they might be interested in a quarterback, but I just don't know, given the holes on their roster, that they can't really afford to trade up for one. So I could maybe see them taking somebody like if Jaden Daniels fell for some reason, but I just think it's probably rare that's going to happen, at least at this point. So I think they're just like, hey, our staple's been offensive line. And if we want to see what Will Levis can be, I mean, they could definitely go receiver as well. So,
well, they certainly need
but that's
another
where
one of
I'm at.
those because yeah, D-Hop isn't going to play forever. Let's be honest about that situation, right? And Traylon Burks hasn't shown us very much. Will Levis is not a guy I'm entirely sold on. I think D-Hop made him look good on a lot of those throws that people are hyping him up on. Look, Shanu's safe. Given this is more of a fantasy geared show, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about offensive line, so we're going to jump right to 8 here. Arizona, by virtue of the trade down with Atlanta, is finally on the clock. They're getting some help for Kyler Murray. We don't know what's going on with Hollywood Brown. That he's a free agent. Is he coming back? Is he going? You've got Trey McBride, another great pass catcher there, but you're thinking Washington wide receiver, Rome Odunze. Another one of these kind of blue chip level wideouts. I think he's kind of a step behind those other two guys, but Rome's a player. Talk to me about how he can go ahead and lift that quarterback and that offense to another level.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy to me that he's always open. I think it was Dane Brugler had a really good comp for him. I think he said it was kind of, I've been seeing a little bit of Keenan Allen. He said Amari Cooper, and it's probably somewhere in between those two. This guy was a track star in high school, so I think he's probably going to do better at the combine than we think. He's maybe one of those guys that maybe he doesn't always get enough separation. He doesn't always look fast, but man, this guy just does everything. And I just think he's always open regardless. And for Arizona, Michael Wilson showed a little bit of flashes this year, but it's like, he's a late 3rd round pick. Hollywood Brown, I think they're probably committed to building around Kyler Murray. So I just think Odunze is such a good prospect and such a good player. It's just hard to really imagine him falling further than this, or around the 8-10 range. He's just a guy that I really like. I feel like he's another guy that's just plug and play right away, where I think maybe we looked at like Quentin Johnson last year. Like we were excited maybe about his potential ceiling, but didn't really view him as someone that could contribute right away. With Odunze, I just feel like, man, this guy's ready.
Yeah, I don't have a guy that's like QJ in this class. I was out on that guy from the jump. But Odunze is a guy that can play. You're right. He's open all the time. He finds ways to get to the ball. He can high point. He can do all the things you ask a guy to do. Again, we're not going to get too deep in the weeds because we're trying to cover 32 players here. But Odunze absolutely looks like a guy who's a high first-round draft pick. In most classes, he's the wide receiver 1. He comes out last year, he's the wide receiver 1 amongst these other guys, JSN and Addison and those other guys. So when you start to think about it in those terms, when we look at the wide receiver landscape for fantasy, Odunze is going to be a guy people are going to steal in rookie drafts. It's not even going to be close. And if he goes to Arizona, it's a situation that allows for some high caliber targets. Let's just assume for a moment you've got Hollywood Brown on the other side. Hollywood Brown, and maybe this is just me, he's not an alpha 1. He's not that dominant receiver. He's a nice complementary piece. But Odunze could be the guy that takes on the number 1 targets. That's an easy 130 target a year type of guy. It's how he profiles. Absolutely love him as a player. I think he's going to be a great asset here. And Kyler Murray's accurate enough to take full advantage of that. You saw what he was able to keep the numbers up with D-Hop and some of these other guys. Kyler's not terrible. He just needs someone to count on. And I think Odunze can be that guy here. So I really love that pick there. Let's jump to number 9. And IDP folks, we're finally on the board here. The Chicago Bears, with their second first-round pick, are taking Florida State edge rusher Jared Verse. I love Verse. I'm not sure he's the number 1 edge rusher in this class at this point. Jury's still out. I'm going to get through the Senior Bowl and make some decisions there. But this is an excellent player who plays with a ton of power. He's got enough speed. I love his bull rush. Talk to me about your reasoning for Jared Verse to the Bears.
Yeah, I just think that they, if they're building around Fields, they get Harrison. Their offense is starting to come together, but think they're Eberflus's staples kind of defense. So it's like you get another edge rusher that you can put opposite of Montez Sweat. And, they spent some big money on linebackers last year. Did they re-sign Jalen Johnson, or I'll have to find out, but I feel like he's someone that's going to be back.
Sheet.
So I just feel like the best. Yeah. I just feel like he kind of fits like what the Bears can do, because I just think, man, you just have two really good edge rushers on the same team. It just fixes so many holes on a defense right away.
Oh, absolutely. And the Sweat trade really helped them a lot. You spent a bunch of money on off-ball linebackers last season. You've got Brisker, who you drafted. Eddie Jackson's still there. You bring back Jalen Johnson. You suddenly have a stack of players on this defense, and that puts this offense in a really plus position where they're going to be able to kind of control the clock a little bit, because if that defense is only allowing 10 to 17 points a week, then you know what? You're in a great spot, because that offense doesn't have any pressure on it. And if you're telling me you've got Marvin Harrison and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet and Justin Fields running around, and say they get a running back via trade, free agency, or in a later round that can play, no offense to Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson, but there's a lot of talented players out there that could probably dwarf those guys. So I love Jared Verse to Chicago. Some other guys that I'd love to see there, give me, Leatu Latu from UCLA. I think that guy's incredibly quick. Great first step. We'll talk more about him later. And then don't forget Dallas Turner from Alabama, overshadowed quite a bit in the kind of the wake of Will Anderson being there. So he doesn't get quite the same accolades and attention that Will Anderson had. But any one of these three guys, it just kind of depends on your flavor, right? They're all a little bit different. I still really like Verse going to Chicago here. Let's round out the top 10, though. Another offensive lineman, New York Jets. Hey, man, you lost your number one quarterback in Aaron Rodgers due to injury last year. We got to get solid up front, right? Especially if he's only got a year or two left. Joe Alt, Notre Dame to the New York Football Jets. Let's talk about Alt. Why do you like him?
Well, I think that some teams are probably going to have him ahead of Fashanu. He really, really had a great season. His dad actually is a pro player. His dad blocked for Joe Montana in Kansas City. Now he's a guy who was actually a wide receiver tight end before he went to college. Now his dad did not let him play offensive line until, I believe, end of high school, early college, because he wanted his son to have a different skill set. And I think that's actually helped with his athleticism, because he's a very athletic tight end. He moves extremely well. So I think that's actually probably helped him versus just being a guy that's been playing tackle for a decade by now. You know what I mean? So
sure.
I think the Jets probably have the two worst tackles in the league. Mekhi Becton's definitely been a letdown. I believe that he gave up like some of the most sacks and was like the most penalized tackle in football this year. So, the Jets are all in on Rodgers because of the guarantees that he's still owed. So it's like, as long as he wants to come back, they don't have any other option. The Jets are chasing this hand to the river, So I just think they've got to protect Rodgers. There's really nowhere else for them to go, in my opinion.
I can dig it. Well, like we talked about earlier, fantasy show, we're not going to spend a ton of time on O-linemen until they actually land somewhere. So we'll keep it moving here. Pick number 11. We're getting back into the NFC North here. The Minnesota Vikings. Talk about a tale of two teams. In 2023, you lose Kirk Cousins. Justin Jefferson's hurt. They were a kind of middling team. They had some good stories with guys like Josh Dobbs. And you go back to 2022, and they were running roughshod over the league, into the playoffs. But I'm not sure which Minnesota team is the real thing. I think it might be a blend of the two. But UCLA edge, Leatu Latu, coming on board, playing opposite of Danielle Hunter, or is he replacing Danielle Hunter?
It looks like playing opposite. Did they get an extension done with Hunter, or is that still up in the air? I'll have to look.
I've done no contract research, and I won't. Yeah, well, it's too early to do contract research. Let's do that when the new league year starts and guys have actually either been, re-upped or whatever, and what have you, because a lot's going to change between January the 13th today and the beginning of the new league year. But there's been a lot of talk about Hunter, though, whether he was going to be staying, going, trade, free agency. Like that's kind of why I asked the question of, do we think they're playing together, or is he replacing?
Yeah, it could be one or the other. I felt like their defense really came together under Brian Flores this year. So if he doesn't get a head coaching job somewhere, he's going to be back. I feel like with how much Flores loves to blitz, I just feel like Latu is just a perfect fit for what they do. Minnesota's pretty set on offense, man. I mean, their line's pretty good. You know, if Cousins is back, they've obviously got great receivers. They're set at tight end. So I feel like they're definitely going to go defense with this pick for sure.
Well, they have to, because you and I could probably run for 100 yards on that defense and maybe throw for 250 more. It's pretty rough out there right now.
Yeah. Only question mark I have for Latu was, this is a guy that was at Washington. He medically retired from college football, sat out a year, and then he got cleared by the doctors at UCLA and was able to play. So maybe it's not going to be an issue, but I'm curious, what are the medicals at the combine going to say for this guy? I'm just wondering. I think that's probably why I had Verse
can't wait to. That makes sense. Well, and that's a guy that'll be at the Senior Bowl. Sure. No, I get it. I'll be at the Senior Bowl at the end of the month here, and I'll be at the practices and the press conferences, and I'm going to see if I can score some one-on-one time and ask him about it and see what we can do and figure out, hey, man, what inspired the change, right? And let's talk to this guy a little bit and figure out what we can learn and glean from some of the answers. So hopefully in our Senior Bowl wrap-up, we'll have some answers about that. Let's go out to the Rocky Mountain State here. Denver on the clock at 12. You've got him taking offensive lineman J.C. Latham from Alabama. Talk to me about Latham.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a question of, can this guy play left tackle, because he played on the right side this year. I kind of thought that Alabama was going to switch him. They decided not to. Garrett Balls is going to be 32, and I believe he's going to next year be the last year on his deal. Denver could go a variety of ways. I just think if they're going to move on from Russ, they're going to take on a pretty hefty cap hit. They're not really going to have the cap space to really kind of do a lot of things. You know, they paid Mike McGlinchey a ton of money to play right tackle. So this is a team, if quarterback doesn't fall into their lap, probably just going to have to go best player available. I could see them going receiver too, if like Jerry Jeudy's not back and some of those other guys. But I do like Latham. I feel like he had a really, really good season. And, you know, this is a good tackle class. So I think if they feel comfortable, hey, this guy can be our left tackle, then it's like they're getting that piece in place, because probably 2025 would be a big year for Denver in terms of bringing in a quarterback. So we'll see. I think they're probably going to bring in a bridge, maybe like a Jameis Winston for a year, and have him kind of compete with Stidham. I know that doesn't sound like the sexy option, but like Sean Payton's got a ton of job security. So it's like he's not in demand to win right now.
Sure. So here's a thought. They've got all that money tied up on the two tackles, and I get Garrett Bowles could be on his way out, but with all the money they tied up in their O-line last year through free agency, what about getting a little bit more help on defense? The defense wasn't bad last year by any measure, but you've got some guys in secondary. They had to turn loose one guy, Kareem Jackson, because he couldn't stop, collecting all kinds of penalties and suspensions. You got another guy back there that's getting a little old. We got a couple guys back there that are in the 30 range. What about a guy like Cooper DeJean here? Kind of that versatile. You can play him at safety, slot corner, pull him up in the box, drop him back. He does a little bit of everything. Yeah. Do you think that fit in Denver would have been kind of a reasonable second place in terms of, hey, I'm looking for best player? Guy steps right in. So
yeah, I think edge too. Maybe
thought.
Like a Dallas Turner. Yeah, maybe like a Dallas Turner. I think it was easier for me to go edge with the next pick based on this team and what they do and what their roster makeup is and how bad their edge rushers were. So yeah, I could see it for sure. It was hard flipping this pick and the next pick because I just didn't like the fit of Latham for the next team, but I feel like he's just so good. The 14th team, that I have a hard time just seeing him fall any further in the draft.
Well, this next team might actually need an edge if they don't bring Antonio Pierce back. There's some rumors that the Las Vegas Raiders, if they can't bring Antonio Pierce back, that Max Crosby will demand a trade. And if that comes to fruition, this pick is going to be totally up for grabs. In the number 13 slot, Las Vegas Raiders going quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. We both love Penix. We think he's incredibly accurate player. He's got the gun. It was on full display in the playoffs. Championship game, he got roughed up a little bit. But all in all, his film against everybody, including in all the big games, right? Oregon and USC and all these different teams he played, he generally showed up and showed out, right? The numbers are all there and intact. Talk to me about why Michael Penix to Vegas makes the most sense.
Well, I mean, they're not going to trot out Aiden O'Connell next year. I think Aiden O'Connell could be a fine backup. Jimmy G is gone. So I've gotten a lot of reports out of there that Mark Davis, like Washington, wants to make a splash at quarterback. They're in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, so they need to find somebody to keep pace with those guys. I could see if Harbaugh went to the Raiders, I could see them going JJ McCarthy here, but we can talk about that later. I think Bo Nix is probably going to be in some of the round one conversation, even though you and I aren't as high on him. So I do like Penix. Feel like he's a bit of a gunslinger. The Vegas is going to do something at quarterback. What they do, I don't know, but so they're going to have somebody new under center. And if they don't move up in the draft, I think they'll take somebody here. If obviously they're still there, or they're going to try to make waves in free agency, but I don't really know who's going to be available for them.
Sure. No, that makes a ton of sense. It's so tough with the Raiders, man. It feels like they've just been like toiling in mediocrity for 20 years now. They always seem to get really, really close, right? They're always kind of right there. And then it just all comes undone again. I'd love to see Michael Penix there. The medicals have to check out. And you're talking about a guy with 2 ACL injuries, and we watched him get just beat up against Michigan. There was the ribs, it was the ankle, it was, he was getting knocked all over the field. And it affected him, you could tell, especially in the second half of the third quarter, the fourth quarter. He started looking pretty rough. Obviously, I think the skill set's there. He can definitely elevate that offense, and he'll be able to carry a guy like a Devontae Adams to fantasy glory once again, right? Because Aiden O'Connell was not that guy. But they do have to do something. My curiosity here is, do you think they move this pick and something else to go get a bona fide starter? Is there another team out there that would be willing to trade their guy to the Raiders to get this pick and another pick, and maybe they're willing to come up and take a guy like a Michael Penix? I don't know who that team would be. I don't know what that would look like. But
yeah, I think it's tough because pretty much everybody at the end of the draft, with Pittsburgh pretty much being the exception, is every playoff team is set at quarterback for the foreseeable future. So it's just hard to really pencil somebody else in at that point. You know what I mean?
Here's a wild thought. I'm gonna get crazy here. So Minnesota picks at 11. What if they franchise tag Kirk Cousins and the Raiders negotiate the trade, and they trade 13 plus their one next year for Kirk Cousins? Does Minnesota take Michael Penix there?
I think McCarthy, it could be Penix. I think McCarthy kind of fits the mold of what O'Connell's looking for. And we'll talk about McCarthy a little bit later, but I don't necessarily see him as a guy that can start right away. Like, I think he's got a high ceiling. I think he can be good, but I think he's going to have to sit for a year or two, or you sprinkle him in. He maybe makes a start here and there. Don't think he's going to be ready.
Sure.
But at the same time, I love the upside. So,
right.
Yeah, I could see it. I think Minnesota, it's just weird because everyone keeps telling me Cousins is going to be back. But like a year ago at this time, Kwesi and O'Connell, they had the window open to do an extension with Kirk. And it's obvious from watching the quarterback on Netflix that Cousins loves Minnesota. His family loves Minnesota. He wants to be in Minnesota for the foreseeable future. So it was like that lane was completely open for them to get an extension done, and it didn't happen. Brett Coleman reported that the Minnesota was furiously trying to come up for Anthony Richardson on draft day too. So I don't know. They have kind of given the indication that they want to move on from Cousins, but at the same time, I think the second half of the year kind of showed how much they needed Cousins. If they even had Cousins this year, they would have won 10, 11 games. There would have been no question about it.
Yep, 100%. So no, I agree. I just like to float these ideas out there just like to float some ideas to kind of generate some would-be storylines, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and shoot on to the next pick. Number 14, New Orleans Saints. Going edge rusher, Alabama, Dallas Turner. We talked a little bit about Dallas earlier. Let's talk about the fit. How does he blend in New Orleans?
Yeah. Well, I think, Carl Granderson and, Cameron Jordan, obviously he's had a great career, but he's kind of on the back nine. They have not had the pass rush they've had in years past. And the way that they're built under this, they're going to enter the offseason $50 million over the cap. So they're going to have to do all this math, gymnastics again to get back under the cap. One of the ways that you can do that is, you spend your first round pick on an expensive position that hopefully you can get good production from someone on a rookie deal. So you're kind of saving money there. I just think, they've paid so much money for Derek Carr. They're kind of stuck. I mean, they're kind of all in trying to win now, but I question what their ceiling is. But at the same time, I just think, the Saints are kind of stuck. They don't really want to rebuild. They keep trying to just patch this together and keep extending it. And they're freeing up cap space by restructuring these deals and pushing more money out to later. But then it's like when some of these older players start falling off, it's just, I don't know. But I just feel like Turner, such a good fit. And he actually had a good year. A lot of the Alabama edge rushers coming out don't necessarily have gaudy stats because of how much Saban has always rotated his defensive line. And their scheme doesn't always allow for a free rusher all the time. Like, just because you're playing edge doesn't mean you're pass rushing on every down. They like to mix up scheme and coverage and drop these. They had him dropping back into coverage quite a bit this year, but he still had over 10 sacks. So I just feel like he's a good fit.
Sure. No, I like Dallas Turner. I think this is a guy that profiles as a double-digit sack guy every year. So if you're playing IDP, especially on sleeper, where he's probably going to have dual position eligibility, D-line and linebacker, he's going to be a great guy to get. Is he going to do it rookie year? Probably not. This might be a situation where you're waiting a year or two to see that production. So you're probably looking at him as more of a dynasty asset than a redraft asset. But I like Turner enough. He does a little bit of everything. At Alabama, he was asked to do contain quite a bit and asked to do some of these other things like you've already alluded to. But he's a complete player who can step on the field right away and contribute. I just think the Saints would probably rotate him more than we would care to see that happen. And that'll kind of limit his production as a rookie. But year two, I would be expecting big things out of him. So let's go out to Indianapolis here. This is where one of my favorite players in the draft is finally coming off. You're going defensive back Cooper DeJean at number 15 to Indianapolis. So let's talk about the Iowa product.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a couple on the beat this week, and we kind of agreed they're probably going wide receiver or corner here because Kenny Moore is going to be a free agent and Michael Pittman is going to be a free agent. I do expect Michael Pittman to be back. Even if they don't get a deal done, he's going to get the franchise tag because they're all in on trying to build around Richardson. I mean, they really don't have a choice. So if they can build around Richardson and they've got Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. And so, Gus Bradley is going to be back as defensive coordinator. He likes to run a lot of cover 3, which kind of dates back to his, Seattle days. But I do think DeJean's kind of a versatile chess piece. Chris Ballard tends to like those guys that blow up at the combine. Like if you look at last year, I don't think any Colts player drafted had under like a 9 on the RAS score. So I do think one of the other corners could maybe fit this bill. Maybe Terry and Arnold, maybe Nate Wiggins as well. But I like DeJean because he's so versatile that you can really line this guy up all over the field. So sometimes it's hard to draft a corner who maybe plays outside and then you're like, well, this guy's going to play inside, but then you don't know exactly how that's going to translate. I feel like with DeJean, we already know.
Right. Yeah, I think he's a great player. We talked about him a little bit with his versatility. He can go to the slot. He can, play zone. He can man up a little bit. He's athletic. And we're going to see that at the Combine. I'm very excited about him. I'm actually an Iowa State guy, so it's hard for me to be excited about a Hawkeye on any level. But we'll make an exception for Cooper here. Let's go down to Florida, talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars for a minute. At the 16th pick, you've got them going O-line here. Going to give some protection to Trevor Lawrence. And I hope I don't butcher his name too badly here. Troy Fotanu?
Oh, no, I think it's Seattle. 16, Seattle.
16. Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote down Jacksonville. Yeah, it's Seattle. You're getting protection for my fault, everybody. I've been doing things in pen here. I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, so this
Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. Troy Fontenot. This was obviously the mock came out before Pete Carroll was gone. I do think we could expect Seattle could be in play for a quarterback. At the same time, they've got pretty good tackle play as it is. And I've talked to a couple of scouts around the league who do feel like Fontenot would be better moved inside as a guard. So depending on what Seattle wants to do, they kind of fortified their defensive line because they traded for Leonard Williams at the deadline, so they don't have a second rounder. maybe, typical John Snyder fashion, he likes to trade back. Wouldn't shock me if they traded back from that pick to try to recoup some of the draft capital they lost from trading for Leonard Williams. I don't know. Seattle is like so much in limbo because we don't know what they're going to do, obviously. But Fontenot is a guy that I like, and if teams don't necessarily think that he can play tackle, that I think he could have a nice career as a guard.
If teams view him as a guard, I feel like he probably drops. I don't know that he's going in the top 25. He's probably a guy that drops into the second round potentially. So that might be something to watch and keep an eye on as we're going through workouts and combine and all that, and starting to kind of read the tea leaves on what teams are thinking, and kind of keeping an eye on like some of the other mock drafts that are out there, the Daniel Jeremiahs and the Lance Zierleins and some of these guys, because they're going to start to give us a sense of where that guy's going to fall. Again, O-line, we're not going to spend a ton of time there, but that Seattle pick is a real pivot point in the draft because there's a few players in this spot that are going to be hyper valuable, and we're going to get to those guys in a minute. But let's jump to 17. Now we're going to go down to Florida. Now we're going to Jacksonville. They're not getting offensive line help for Trevor Lawrence. They're going defense. Clemson corner, Nate Wiggins, #1 DB on the board right now, as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk about Wiggins and what he can provide at the corner spot.
Yeah, I mean, I love that play. I forget who it was against. It was, I don't know if it was against North Carolina, but the running back like broke a big play and was running down the sideline, and Wiggins caught him from behind and then punched the ball out at like the 1 or 2 yard line. Like this guy just sprinted his ass off down the field and forced a fumble. And I think they ended up winning that game. And so that's just one of those plays that, it's just one play, but man, that just tells me so much about Wiggins that it was just like, man, like this guy plays every play like it's his last. He's got a high motor, he's got good size. He had a really good year. So I just feel like Jacksonville, they got a pretty good team on paper. I don't know that they have like a glaring hole, but I feel like, we've got a couple of good corners in this draft who have gotten pushed down. So, they're going to maximize value with this pick.
Sure. I think the corners in this class probably aren't as good as what we're going to see next year. When we get Will Johnson next year, and we're going to get, Travis Hunter and some of these other guys. And so that's probably part of where the valuation might kind of sink these guys a little bit. We were not going to do a ton of cornerback stuff in IDP, but if you do line up corners, hey, these rookie guys, they get targeted a little bit, and Wiggins will. It'll be kind of like AJ Terrell's first year where he got targeted a little bit until he made somebody pay. And then the production's going to drop right off the ladder after that. But he'll be good for some passes defensed, might kick in a pick here or there. But, I mean, this isn't going to be a difference maker at the position. Nothing against him, just the way corners are scored in fantasy. So unless you have a league that does differential scoring for corners where they get a bonus for tackles or anything else, we're not falling over ourselves to grab them in IDP drafts. Let's go ahead and go to 18, though. We're back in your home state of Ohio here. We're going to talk about Cincinnati. And some of these names, we're starting to get into some names now where I'm probably going to have some trouble with pronunciation. I'll get it right before April, but we're in January. I'm still loosening up here. Telis Fuaga.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I hit that one right.
I think it's, Fuaga.
So tell me about the fit. Fuaga. Okay.
Well,
so
I think it's
fit here.
So so they moved Jonah Williams to right tackle. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's kind of had an up and down career. He's probably someone, because of position scarcity, that's going to get paid on the open market. But the Bengals probably don't want to pay him because they've still got to pay, figure out Jamar Chase and Higgins, and DJ Reader's a free agent. So Fuaga, he's definitely best on the right side. Unfortunately, two out of Joe Burrow's 4 seasons have ended prematurely due to injury. So I think it's pretty obvious they need to protect him. And, I could see them going defensive tackle, could see them going receiver, depending on what happens with T. Higgins. I think they're probably going to end up franchise tagging Higgins and kind of seeing what happens going from there. So I feel like this guy's someone they could plug and play right away as the right tackle for next year and beyond.
Cool. I can dig it. Let's go ahead and move on to Green Bay.
He also didn't give up a sack in his college career, according to PFF. So,
wow. Okay. Hey, it's always good to get a guy that doesn't give up sacks. You don't want to see your quarterback on the ground. That fit is going to be pretty natural in Cincinnati. Anybody that can help keep Joe Burrow upright is going to be a worthwhile addition there. But let's go ahead. Offensive line again. We're not getting into the weeds on that for fantasy here. But another IDP potential asset here, especially if you play with designated defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen, Jerzon Newton.
Yeah.
So D tackle to the Green Bay Packers at 19. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I think, we look at Brian Gutekunst's history as GM. He tends to prioritize offensive and defensive lines with the early picks, kind of with the belief that he can hit on skill players later in the draft. And to be honest, I think looking at Dontavian Wicks and some of these other guys
Jaden
they
Reed.
have, Jaden Reed,
Romeo Dubs,
Romeo
Tucker
Dubs. Kraft. I think it's pretty clear that that's their blueprint. I could see them going offensive line as well. Now, David Bakhtiari says he's coming back next year, but his career has really been limited from injury the last 3 years. So is he the same player? I think it's going to be offensive or defensive line for them. It's just feel like the rest of their roster is pretty good. Maybe corner, but again, I'm feeling good about the Newton pick, and I kind of like him because he can actually rush the passer, which when we're projecting defensive linemen this early in the draft, obviously it's got to be someone who can play all 3 downs. The guys who are only first and second down defensive tackles, like those guys get pushed down to round 3 now because they don't analytics just say, hey, it's not worth a first round pick for this guy. The Danny Sheltons of the world who were once a first round pick, those guys are going in round 3 now. So I look at Newton, he's kind of got a mean streak, but his arm length could be an issue. I'm curious to see what his official measurements are going to be, but he can really get after the quarterback from the interior, that's pretty hard to find.
I kind of wonder if this is a move to eventually displace Kenny Clark, because he's not getting any younger. And even if his arms are a little shorter inside, that's okay. If they plop him in the middle and let him move around the interior D line a little bit, where he could be playing anywhere from a 0 to a 2 or something like that in terms of technique. I love the slotting here. Like you, I want to see him work out. Another guy where IDP in this particular draft isn't particularly strong. It's good, but it's not great. Again, not falling over myself here in blended leagues. I'll probably let him go to round 5 or 6 in my IDP leagues, and we'll see how it goes. But definitely one of those better in real football than fantasy football. So good slotting there. This is one of my absolute favorite players in the draft. We're going down to Tampa Bay at pick number 20. And you've got Oregon wide receiver Troy Franklin. I absolutely love this kid. Effortless speed, really tall, still gets his hips sunk when he's breaking. They didn't target him nearly enough. This guy should have had 100 catches because he's so dang good and he's always open, whether it's vertical or off of a break.
Yeah.
Just get the ball around him and he's got it. So talk to me about your view on Troy Franklin. Obviously, I could wax poetic about him all day long, so I'd like to hear where you're at.
Yeah. He had a little bit of an issue with drops this year. I believe he had 10 drops, but I really like the way that he plays. Like, he's very fast. He's tall. He's long. He runs pretty good routes. And he was a huge part of Bo Nix's success. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to rise up draft boards as we get closer to the draft. Like, I don't think there's probably a 12 pick difference between him and Rome Odunze, like my mock suggests, but hard to say. I do think Franklin's going to jump up boards. I think I've seen some mocks with him going in round 2, and I'm just like, man, I think this guy's too good. So Tampa could go so many ways here. It's like Mike Evans is going to be a free agent. They've got a pretty good core, but that core is starting to get older. They've got some good pieces in place. They're probably picking too high that they made the playoffs. I would expect they're probably going to get a 1 or 2 year deal done with Baker Mayfield, probably bring him back. We know he likes to throw deep. He's got a big arm. So Franklin kind of, unlocks that for them. They could go any number of ways with this pick. I would say, so I just feel like he's too talented to fall any further than this.
I think it'll be really funny if Tampa Bay beats Philadelphia. Sorry, Eagles fans. You got Baker Mayfield just out there bakering around, doing what he does, just stumbling through the playoffs. And having a guy like Troy Franklin at his disposal will only make him better, make that whole offense better. You're talking about a guy who offers not the same, use the word girth here, as Mike Evans, but he's got the same height, length, range. He's fast. He's going to be a nightmare to cover. So if you let Mike Evans walk and then you go ahead and you bring in, a Troy Franklin type player, I think you're actually going to give your offense a whole nother dimension, or at least a better dimension than what you've had. And I'm not saying that at this moment he's better than Mike Evans. But what I'm saying is he's a lot faster, and you can stretch the defense a lot quicker and put more pressure on the secondary, which will alleviate a lot of things for the rest of the offense. Cade Otton suddenly is more open. Chris Godwin, if he's still around, he's more open. The running backs are able to get out and get more space. You're not able to compress the box, which will make whoever's playing running back a lot more effective. This is the kind of guy who kind of changes the dynamic of an offense. I'm not worried about his drops. Drops kind of come and go. They're not a sticky stat. Did he have 10? Yeah, a lot of those are probably on high difficulty catches. I like to kind of parse that out and get more context. So, Troy Franklin's a player that after watching him, I think I'm 6 or 8 games in of like hard all 22 scouting, and I just love this kid. He just looks like a difference maker at the next level. But this isn't the Troy Franklin show. This is a mock draft show. So we're going to get on to the next team here. Let's go ahead and move on to pick number 21. Arizona Cardinals back on the clock with their second first. And what? They needed some refreshment here. So they went Kool-Aid McKinstry here out of Alabama, defensive back going corner. Talk to me about Kool-Aid and what's your favorite flavor?
Yeah. I mean, they're in a division with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, DK Metcalf, JSN, Lockett. So, I mean, you really need 2 good corners in this division. And just looking at Arizona, I just think they just need good football players right now. It's like part of their rebuild. Some people like Terrion Arnold a little bit more, who played alongside McKinstry. He was very, very highly recruited. So cornerback can sometimes be a tough eval because you can't always look at the stats, because sometimes being an elite cornerback means you don't have any stats because the quarterbacks or the offense is like, we're not even going to bother throwing at this guy. I think Darrelle Revis is probably the best example of that. He might not have had a ton of interceptions like in his NFL career, but like you just knew from watching him, you're like, man, this guy is unbelievable. Now, I'm not saying McKinstry is Revis, obviously. I'm just saying from a, evaluation perspective, you can't always look at the stat sheet for cornerbacks.
Sure. Yeah, this is a guy that'll probably get avoided a lot of the time. Like, is he foolproof? Is he Sauce Gardner? I don't think so. But he's definitely a guy that they're going to stay away from him enough where he's not really going to pile up fantasy stats. So for IDP, not really in here on Kool-Aid, but he's going to be a great addition to somebody's team because he is a good corner. He's athletic, he's long, flexible. He can do a lot of different things. He's definitely not Sauce Gardner. He's not, Stingley. He's not going to be some of these other guys that are coming out. I don't think he's ever going to be the premium number 1 shutdown lockdown guy, but he's a dude that you can plant on one side of the field and feel good that you don't have to mess with that position again for 5 years. And that's really all you can ask for in this league. So gotta love Kool-Aid there. I'm a grape Kool-Aid kind of guy myself. I don't know what your favorite is, but that's what I usually keep in the house. So let's go to 22, going to Los Angeles. The Rams, Sean McVay's group, looking for the heir apparent here to Matt Stafford. Now, I'm looking at this, and I kind of raised an eyebrow when I saw this initially. J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan going to hang out with Sean McVay. Tell me about the fit. Tell me why I should be excited.
He's a high character guy. I think so many people looked at his stat sheet and like he won the national title. And I think people were like, oh, this guy's team carried him. And, but if you look at the strength of what Michigan's team was this year, it's like they had 2 good running backs. They had an elite defense. They didn't need this guy to drop back 35 times a game. It just wouldn't have made any sense. They went 15-0 and won the national title. They built their team around what they do well. But I think that says a lot about McCarthy's character. Like, this guy's a winner. He was able to put aside his ego for the sake of the team. He won. He's really, really athletic. He's big. He's, he needs to put on probably 10, 15 pounds, but he's got a big arm. And, I think if he stayed another year under Harbaugh, developed a little bit more, he probably was someone that would go maybe top 10 next year. But, this guy's still 20. He's not even going to be 21 for another week. So he probably going to come out because Harbaugh's probably going to the NFL. I don't know if I see McCarthy going back to Michigan. He kind of leaves on a high note. Now, I really like his upside. He's probably not ready to play right away, but Matthew Stafford's I think he believes he's going to be 36. He's had some injuries in the past. I feel like McCarthy, man, if he sat for 2 years and just learned the system, if he sat for 2 years, kind of learned the system, kind of gives the Rams insurance for someone to take over from for Stafford. I just really, really like the fit. But again,
So you're out on Stetson
depends
Bennett.
what the Rams are going to do. Yeah.
So you're out on Stetson. You don't think he's the heir apparent to Matt Stafford?
No,
you don't have to answer that.
I don't.
Look, I like JJ McCarthy here. He's a player I really enjoy watching. I don't watch the full game on him. I like just watching the cut-ups because it just shows me his throws over and over and over again. And man, I'll tell you, the ball jumps off his hand. He's got the velocity, he's got the arm strength, he's got the accuracy. He flashes enough athleticism. He kind of looks like a slightly more twitched up version of like Alex Smith. Alex Smith was great for the Chiefs. He was miserable in San Francisco. The 49ers changed OCs on him like 5 years in a row or something nuts like that. He just never got his footing. He gets into Kansas City, and all of a sudden he's a fantasy dynamo. This kid's going to give you a little bit on the ground. He's going to give you enough through the air at the NFL level. He's not going to be limited the way he was at Michigan to throwing the ball 8 times a game or whatever. Those are things we don't have to worry about. The traits are there. This is a first-round talent. I love the idea of a creative play caller like Sean McVay getting his hands on a creative quarterback like McCarthy. I think that's a match made in heaven. It's probably only 1 year. I don't know if it's 2 years. 1 year, and he'll probably start pushing Stafford enough where they'll have to make a decision. So really, really like that fit. Let's go ahead and you mentioned Terry and Arnold, the other corner that played opposite of Kool-Aid McKinstry. You've got him going to Pittsburgh here at 23. Another Alabama product. Nick Saban obviously is now retired, but he's still sending these guys to the NFL. 2 corners in round 1 is kind of a big deal. Talk to me about Arnold and why he's so close to Kool-Aid on the draft board here.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just depends your, kind of flavor. I think with Pittsburgh, they nailed the Joey Porter pick, but they got Pat Pete, who's kind of getting up there in age. They play in a division that's got some good receivers. This wouldn't be the typical, Pittsburgh pick, but I just feel like looking at the board, Pittsburgh's got a pretty good team. I think that they, obviously they've got quarterback issues, but I just don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to draft another quarterback in the first round? Are they going to try to make a run at like a Russell Wilson type, maybe a Kirk Cousins? I don't know. Pittsburgh, but I think outside of quarterback, Pittsburgh's roster is pretty good. But I think they're finding out, yes, they're in the playoffs, but it's hard to sustain success in this league without your quarterback shored up. So maybe they'll figure that out, but I just like the Arnold pick for them because I feel like he's such a good player. I just had a hard time seeing him fall any further than this. Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah, no, I can dig that. That's, and they're a team that it's not the frontline guys they need to replace or update or upgrade. It is a lot of those kind of secondary and tertiary guys that get them hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's, having Arnold on the other side of Porter, that's going to be really a nice fit for them, I think. So let's go ahead and jump down to Miami. It's hit South Beach here. This is a team that's kind of struggled against good football teams, right? They're explosive. They're dynamic. You got Hill and Waddle and Achane and Mostert and all these different guys. And you've got, Mr. Miami Beach himself and Mike McDaniel calling the plays here. He's, looks like a Dolce model out there with his glasses and he's always all decked out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amarius Mims, they're going with one of the hog mollies now. They're getting themselves a big O lineman. I guess replacing Terran Armstead, I would imagine. But talk to me about Mims and how he's going to help Miami.
Yeah, I mean, his tape in the Peach Bowl, his tape was phenomenal against Ohio State. And he's a really young player. He's very inexperienced, but he's another guy I just would expect to blow up at the combine. He's just got so much talent. And Terran Armstead's kind of getting up there in age. They did re-sign Austin Jackson, their right tackle. But Miami, they're kind of like San Francisco, right? That they run this complex, running scheme, and they need some athletic offensive linemen in order to get out and make the plays that they need. So they really don't have any major holes. Kind of looking at their roster, the team's pretty good, but I felt like the number one thing that they could improve was being a little more physical. And maybe with Mims, maybe they say, hey, maybe we'll have this guy play guard for a year and then have him take over at left tackle. So he just got a ton of talent that I just have a hard time seeing him fall any further than this. Miami, like I said, they've got a good team, so they can just kind of go best player available. They're not really necessarily looking for someone to play right away.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can dig it. Offensive line, like I said, a few times already. We're not going to dwell here. Let's move on to
Mm-hmm.
25. I know also time's kind of running up on us here a little bit.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia Eagles are up. Quinyon Mitchell. Talk about Mitchell. Why should Eagles fans be pumped about this move?
I mean, his tape was unbelievable. This guy, yes, he played at a small school, Toledo, but he absolutely just dominated this year. He's a physical corner. He doesn't shy away from contact, loves to tackle. Darius Slay's 33, James Bradbury's 30. So they kind of I think the Eagles are going to go, one of three ways typically in the first round based on what Howie Roseman does. Like they're going to go edge rusher. They're pretty good there. They got some depth. They got Nolan Smith last year. He hasn't really done a whole lot, but I think they're still trying to figure out how to use him. They could go tackle to get somebody in there to take over for Lane Johnson eventually. So I think Lane Johnson's going to be 34, I believe. But they've also got an aging secondary. So if they don't go corner, I could definitely see them going tackle here just to get another body in there. They love to keep their assembly line going at those three spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the way they've been victimized in the secondary, you need to go get another aggressive player back there, a young guy who can run around and make some plays. And I think Mitchell fits that bill. So no, I think he or a player like him will certainly be useful. The only thing that throws me off is that it's not a player from UGA. The Eagles usually just like to draft guys from Georgia. That's
well, they could with Lassiter corner.
They could. It's we'll see how that goes. They might see if they can pump that move to the second round. Let's go down to Kansas City. You got Byron Murphy going to Kansas City at pick 26. So what's Murphy going to bring to the Chiefs?
Oh, man, I just love his game. He really this is defensive tackle from Texas. Chris Jones is going to be a free agent. He's, I believe, 30 or 31. He's been a force for them, but it's like, are they going to pay him big money? The Chiefs tend to be pretty conservative of what they do. They really don't like to pay a lot of these guys post 30, which I think part of the reason they traded Tyreek Hill away. I do think they're going to address receiver, which is pretty apparent. It's been an issue for them this year, but maybe that's something they do in free agency. Maybe they try to get a T. Higgins or I don't know. But Rashee Rice, pretty good player, probably a wide receiver too. I think they need a wide receiver one. But I just think because of they're kind of built to win now, they've got a lot of young receivers. Are they really going to go with another young receiver too? I feel like they kind of need somebody that can contribute immediately, especially if Kelsey, we don't know what's going on with Kelsey. So with Murphy, he kind of like Jerzon Newton can rush the passer, which I think that's something that Chris Jones has been awesome at, that he's good against the run. He's good against, the pass, but he's, like I said, this guy's 30. Are they going to pay him big money? I just don't know if I see it. Maybe they're going to use that money elsewhere. Their defense is already pretty good as it is. So I just think they've kind of undergone a core philosophy shift, the last couple of years since they lost that Super Bowl to the Bucs, where Mahomes just got mauled. That they've really just gone offensive, defensive linemen with their picks, first round pick, second round pick, pretty much the last three drafts. So.
Do we think this pick is in response to Jones leaving? Do we think he's out of there because they're just not going to pony up? Or do we think they're going to try and bring Jones back and add a guy like Murphy here?
They could do that. It'll just really depend. Problem is, I don't think they tag him, or I don't think they tagged him. They signed him to like a 1-year deal that was similar to a tag. I don't know.
Yeah,
Jones is probably going to want to get paid one last time. So I think if they're not willing to pony up, he's probably gone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So, no, I think the idea of going D-tackle, staying in the trenches there, a guy like a Keon Coleman would be really interesting too, going wide receiver there. But, again, it's a matter of, is Jones staying? Is he going? Can they get him at least on the books long enough to make it worthwhile to go to another position? Because, if they don't have that pressure up front, forget it. Everything else they do defensively completely caves in. So I think strategically it makes sense to stay in the trenches there. Right. This next pick, in your article on rotoballer.com, you listed Emeka Egbuka. Since the article's come out, he's decided to go back to school. And so that's just one of those things that kind of happens this time of the year, right? So we've made an adjustment here. So this won't match up exactly with what's in your article, but Minnesota safety Tyler Nubin going to the Houston Texans at pick number 27. Talk to me about this kid. Truthfully, I haven't watched him at all, so I have no point of view.
Yeah, he's a big, he's about 6'2", 6'3", 215. He had a high coverage grade from PFF this year. I think what I liked about him is even though he's a safety, he's really, really versatile. They play him in the slot. They put him in the box. They drop him back. He's very athletic. Now, he was a redshirt senior, so he's 23, a little bit older prospect, but he strikes me as like a plug and play guy. We haven't had a safety go in the first round. Usually we'll always at least see one. Houston could go a variety of ways here. They've got a really good team, with how cheap CJ Stroud's going to be, how cheap Will Anderson's going to be on those rookie deals. They're a team that I would expect to be aggressive in free agency to try to maximize their window while Stroud's on a rookie deal. Maybe they don't want to pay big money for a safety, though, knowing Caserio. So I just really like Nubin. I feel like he kind of gives them some versatility.
Sure.
But
no, I
that
can
Emeka Egbuka, all those Ohio State guys are going back. A lot of them, pretty much everybody. Jack Sawyer, Travion. I think the fact that that class would go to the NFL, having been 0-3 against Michigan, I think that's the sticking point for a lot of those guys. They want to go back because they're like, all the Michigan guys are leaving. We get Michigan at home. We need to beat Michigan next year.
Yeah. Well, what's going on is Harbaugh's leaving. He's probably going to the NFL, and so they're all ringing the bell. Ding dong, the witch is dead. They're all going to go and try and take advantage of that situation, and hopefully they can get that win. Good for them. Hopefully Kevin Coleman's not listening, and I don't want him to, be mad at me for talking about Ohio State beating Michigan potentially. Let's go ahead and move on to 28. So we're getting into these are kind of speculative areas, right? Like obviously these are all kind of just, we're guessing, right? Playoffs aren't completed yet. So we've got the Detroit Lions picking at 28. I kind of love what you did here. You're getting them another legit edge rusher to go opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, who, by my estimation, is one of the best young edge rushers out there. The kid is an absolutely dynamic defensive playmaker. You're going Washington edge, Braylon Trice. I know he's your favorite defensive player in this whole draft. At least I'm pretty sure he is, or he's close. Tell us about Trice and why you love him so much.
This guy's relentless, man. He's just like possessed out there in the sense that Hutchinson is like. Guy's just got an unbelievable motor. I would have liked to have seen him make a few more plays against Michigan. I was a little disappointed. Kind of why I have him outside the top 20. But he strikes me as like this guy's a gritty lunch pail guy. He can actually rush the passer. They against Texas, they lined him up at defensive tackle on third down. He was rushing from the interior. So this guy, he just strikes me as someone that fits the culture in Detroit and what Dan Campbell's trying to build. They can kind of go best player available. They can kind of, even if he's not necessarily a starter, can never have enough guys to get after the quarterback. So I just feel like this guy is someone that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are going to love. Curious how he's going to test at the combine. He's a bigger edge rusher. He's about 6'5", 6'6", 275. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, he can play in that even front or, if you need him to stand up. I think he's best standing up, personally. I'd really rather see him coming off the edge. He does it okay, in standalone, kind of what I call one-off pass rush moves, but he doesn't stack moves as well as I'd like to see him do. So I don't know if he's going to develop into that elite level rusher unless he goes somewhere with a really great coach that can help him really start piling up those moves and help him tie his hands to his feet a little bit more. Because he can get him in trouble a little bit here and there. But, man, he's powerful. He's quick. He's got a good first step. He's got the raw attributes that you can't coach. So now it's just going to be a matter of how much can he be coached up. Some guys like getting coached up. Some guys don't. And so hopefully this is a guy that likes being coached up because he's got a real stake at being one of those top, 2 or 3 guys in this class to be the best edge in the class. So let's go ahead and go past Detroit. Let's go to Buffalo. We're getting back into wide receivers. Felt like we haven't had a wide receiver in forever here. I guess we're maybe replacing Steph Diggs. We're complimenting Steph Diggs. But we're going Brian Thomas out of LSU to the Buffalo Bills at 29. Talk to me about Thomas.
Yeah, he's big. He's fast. Jaden Daniels hit him on a lot of deep plays. Gabe Davis has kind of been their big playmaking receiver downfield. He's going to be a free agent. I can't imagine he's back They kind of have a couple of gadget guys like a Khalil Shakir, who I think could be good, but probably more of a wide receiver 3. So, they brought in Dalton Kincaid. Diggs is 30. He's getting up there. So eventually they're going to need somebody to replace Diggs. And I feel like with Josh Allen's playmaking ability and, what he does off script, Thomas just kind of fits that because it was something he did with Daniels, who maybe has a similar play style to Josh Allen, at least in terms of like, hey, I'm running around, and then all of a sudden I'm firing 40 yards downfield to this guy that broke open. I could just see them meshing well. I think Thomas could end up probably going higher than this. I think maybe sometimes I'm always leery of the team's wide receiver 2 in the sense of, hey, was this guy good because Neighbors was drawing all the attention? And he's not really someone who did a whole lot the first 2 years, but man, he was just so good this year. So I just like his game, but he's someone I want to dig into more during the draft process.
Sure. I mean, I'm looking at, and we haven't had Keon Coleman go yet, and I look at him as one of my favorite players in the class too. He's not Troy Franklin level favorite, but I like him quite a bit. But Brian Thomas is a great player. We'll get more into him in one of our individual player breakdowns. But gotta love getting another receiver in Buffalo for Josh Allen because we got to kind of get him back on track here. Steph Diggs seems like a malcontent at this point, and so bringing in some additional pass catching help probably not the worst thing. Let's go down to Dallas at pick number 30. We're getting close to the end of this thing. We're in the home stretch now. You've got Graham Barton. Gonna go get them a little bit of help from the Duke kid on the O-line, right?
Yeah, I mean, he probably doesn't, and this is kind of what Dane Brugler has said, that he probably doesn't project as a tackle, even though he's listed as a tackle. I believe he's actually going to play center at the Senior Bowl, which I don't know when the last time he's played center, but I feel like the Cowboys definitely could use a little bit of help on the interior. So he's probably someone who's going to project more as a guard, and possibly even a center. So I feel like Dallas doesn't necessarily have a glaring need. Maybe they could go defense. Dan Quinn's probably going to get the Seahawks job, but same time they got to protect Dak. So I could see them going Barton here. He's kind of an older player, but he's smart.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to get some O-line help. I love getting O-linemen. You got to keep your quarterback upright and keep your running backs running through big holes because that equals fantasy production, right? But when I look at the Cowboys and I see how bad they've been at off-ball linebacker, they can't keep Van Der Esch healthy. And when they move Micah Parsons into that off-ball spot, it crushes his fantasy value. He's just not getting the same amount of tackle volume and points that he was as an edge rusher getting sacks. So from an IDP fantasy standpoint, I'm kind of hoping they go off-ball linebacker here, go and get themselves like a Jeremiah Trotter out of Clemson, put a guy in the middle that they can go ahead and say, hey, Micah, stay on the edge and go crush quarterbacks. Trotter, you go ahead and clean up whatever mess, gets past him. That's what I would love to see. But hey, it's January. It's early in the process. We don't even know if Trotter's going to be a one. I think he's probably a top 50 player, but that's one man's humble opinion. Let's go ahead and get to 31 here. My San Francisco 49ers.
I liked Barrett Carter better.
Oh, well, Barrett Carter went back to school. He went back to Clemson, so we're not going to see him this year.
No, I know. I'm saying I liked him better if he was in the class.
I think he would have
probably gone higher. Sorry.
Absolutely. He would have been a top
Jordan
20 guy, but
Jordan Morgan. I believe he's been there for 5 years. How much longer is Trent Williams going to play? I think the 49ers, they don't have any glaring needs. Probably going to have to get a replacement. They lost Mike McGlinchey last year, so their roster is really good. But I think their offensive line's been pretty good. But how much of that is scheme versus talent? They're going to have to, kind of reload in the trenches a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to see us get some more help. Either guard slot, Banks is nice and Williams is nice. I'd love to see another guard, another tackle, any O-line help we can get because. How long is McCaffrey going to play at the level he's playing at? I give him maybe 1 to 2 more years tops, and then there's probably going to be some drop off, right? Like he can't go forever at this rate. So hopefully we can keep Purdy upright and keep McCaffrey, playing at a high level because that's going to keep San Francisco really productive and successful. And as a 49ers fan, I'm selfish. That's what I want. Let's go ahead and hit pick number 32, which, by the way, I don't appreciate the Ravens being marked with the 32nd pick because it means the Ravens beat us again and beat us in the Super Bowl.
I went by Tankathon.
And so thanks, Tankathon. I blame you for this, and I don't appreciate it. I just want you to know that. But you're going edge rusher. You're going outside backer edge rusher here. Chris Braswell out of Alabama to the Baltimore Ravens. they've already got a Dafe Owe. They got they got like Van Noy out there now, and they got all kinds of guys that are putting up sacks
Yeah,
that
they've got,
shouldn't be.
they still have big plans for David Ajabo, who, if he wouldn't have had that Achilles injury at the combine 2 years ago,
Yeah,
or it wasn't was it the
brutal.
combine or a private workout? He was a guy that was probably,
I don't remember. It was,
he was going to be a top 20 pick, and then he ruptured his Achilles. They got him in the end of the second round, I believe, in 2022. He really hasn't been able to get on the field and do much. They've got hopes for him. I just feel like, Braswell, he had a really good year this year. So maybe someone that the Ravens could use. I just feel like you can never have enough pass rushers. They're going against Joe Burrow. So I just feel like Braswell a good player. So, but they could really go anywhere. Maybe they go receiver because
sure.
Odell Beckham's only on a 1-year deal.
True. Beckham on a 1-year deal. I'm sure Bateman's not going to be hanging around much longer. Anytime you're going more defense in Baltimore, I don't think any Ravens fan is going to complain because they love defense out there. So, but that's our first round mock. You can find this article on rotoballer.com. There's going to be a link in the description too. So we hope you got something out of this and started getting familiar with some of the names you're going to be hearing a lot about over the next few months. We did have a few players left out, which, Kyle, given time here, we've been on for quite a bit. Maybe we go ahead and punt some of those names to another show. But guys to keep an eye on, Cameron Kinchins, safety out of Miami, Keon Coleman out of Florida State. That's just a couple of guys offhand. Kyle, who else should we be looking out for as guys that might sneak into the first at this point in the process?
Ooh. Maybe Leonard Taylor, defensive tackle from Miami. He maybe didn't have as good of a year. Defensive tackle Chris Jenkins from Michigan, if he declares. I would say Bo Nix potentially, even though, you and I have our issues with him, just because of supply and demand pushing quarterbacks up the board. I'm not going to see a round 1 running back, obviously. Maybe Jatavian Sanders. I know he's a guy you like, tight end from Texas. Pretty athletic, kind of curious to see what he's going to do at the combine. Maybe he's someone that Miami would be interested in at the end of the first. I don't know. I know you've just talked about that before. So, I would say probably those guys.
Cool. Well, that gives us a few guys. And, we're getting into Senior Bowl season. We're going to be there. Gosh, it's 2 weeks now? About 2.5 weeks till Senior Bowl time. I'll be there. I'll be on site talking to players and all of that. And we'll have some breakdown on that in about 2 weeks. Next week, Kyle, what do you think? Should we start breaking down some quarterbacks and talking a little bit about these guys and how great they all are? Awesome. Well, next week's show, there you go. We're going to be talking quarterbacks, and we'll get into some more depth where each guy's going to get probably 10, 15 minutes, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we'll get to watch my Browns here in the playoffs now. So we'll see. Hopefully they can pull this one out against the Texans. We'll see.
My screen is over here. My camera is over here. I glared over momentarily to catch that Browns shirt and it made me sad. All we can hope for is that, Joe Flacco is out of these playoffs quickly. Sorry, Kyle. He already broke my heart once. But with that.
Yeah, that's true.
For Kyle Lindemann at Rotoballer, for Jeff DiMatteo at Gridiron Ratings, this has been the Dynasty Green Room. Episode number 2. Hope you enjoyed the January mock. Have a great one, everybody.
Yep. We'll see you.
Any parting words?
No.